Hi guys, it's Ray. I am going to show you a tutorial on my Beachscapes sun catcher wall hangings. Um, it's going to be one of these when it's finished. This is the front side. The back's just glossy. Nothing fancy, but the front. It's fairly simple. It may look very complicated and intimidating, but it's really not that bad. I'm going to hang that there out of the way. I start with a regular old embroidery hoop, two parts. They come in colored plastics you could use, or they come in woods. I've been starting with the unfinished wood, and I just take them apart, grab a paintbrush and a little palette. This one I stained with this, or painted, Shipdecked Secret from Treasures by the Sea paint line. Simple. Then I have been putting them on a silicone mat, but my silicone mats are all funky colors, so you can't see as well what's going on inside on the funky colors. You just kind of have to trust the process. So for this one, and this will work fine, I did 6 of them on these yesterday or the day before. This is just a used up old Cricut mat that was no longer sticky. I don't like to re-stick mine. I use them to paint on, pour epoxy on, messy projects on. Put them under my turners when I'm making cups, whatever. I am going to double glove before I start mixing. I did hot glue a bead around the inside. Just, basic hot glue around the inside to make a bit of a dam. Some of it may leak out. That's not a big deal. Tomorrow morning when it's still semi-soft, I will just take a pair of scissors and trim around it. And then if I need to trim tighter, I'll just take an X-Acto knife to it. Not a big deal. Some of them you can see a little bit of the hot glue. This is actually Gorilla Glue hot glue, not my regular glue sticks, and I can see this one a little bit more. So I am going to try to be conscientious of that fact and get a darker color over it. Okay. This is a 10-inch hoop. For this one, I'm still not exactly sure how much epoxy I'm using in the 10 inches. I mixed 280 milliliters this time. For this one, I'm using a 1-to-1 epoxy. This one I'm using Pro Marine Tabletop epoxy. So I did mix 3 separate cups, 2 at 100 milliliters each, 1 at 80 milliliters. I did immediately break them down into smaller cups. I will keep refilling these same smaller cups as needed because I know I don't have enough yet. The reason I broke it down is because if you've never had this happen, this is 80 milliliters of epoxy mixed in one of these cups that seized up and hardened within 5 minutes. If you have too much epoxy in a small confined space, occasionally it will react super fast and be no good. So that is why I try to immediately break it down and portion it out. So for this project, I'm going to use 5 or 6 blues, and I'm going to use 2 browns and some white. I am not going to mix my white yet because I am going to use a paint, not just an ink in that, and I don't want it to set up too fast or get stringy. I have been using, this is just Pinata White ink and a little bit of the Alumilite white opaque dye But I think I'm going to go back to using just a little bit of my white paint for this one. I like the effect of it a little bit better on other projects. I may use all three. So I'm going to get started. I am going to mix, oops, that's all right, won't hurt anything. I'm going to start with teak wood for my darker brown. You can use any browns you want, any blues you want. If your brown turns green, it's not going to be the end of the world. Typically, it will come back. My cup of mixers and such. For my lighter brown, I'm going to need quite a bit of that, so I'm going to use this cup, which is fairly full. I'm going to use latte. I'm going to give it just a drop of espresso, or two. So those will be my browns. I'm going to use some Stream. I will try and read you off the colors. Some of them I may not be able to read anymore. I'm going to use just the Pinata Baja Blue. Some of the colors look similar. When I get to adding more to the cups, I get them mixed up. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to use Indigo as one of my darker blues, because once I get 5 or 6 cups mixed, I honestly can't really tell them apart. I'm going to use a little bit of turquoise. The turquoise and this one, which is aqua, are fairly similar, and they're fairly similar to the Baja Blue. And then I have this beautiful mess, which is my darkest blue, which is simply blue by, I think it's just called Art Company. I'm not sure. I got a 3-pack of these because I needed a green one time. This one's also similar to the Baja Blue. So I'm going to mix all of these up. I am double gloved because I know the inks get messy. I don't wipe them down in between uses and like clean them up because they're constantly out. So I'm just going to give them a quick mix. I don't even care if they're not like crazy mixed. This brown I'm just going to set aside for a minute because that is going to be the first one I use, and it is going to get some sand mixed in with it. I am currently using sand that I sourced on a vacation because it's a chunky sand and I like the texture of it. I have not been able to find in stores a comparable sand yet. When I do, I'll stop using my own vacation sand. But until then, that's what I'm going to go with. This one I'm going to leave fairly light because you do want contrast in your colors. Trying to think if there's any steps I forgot to tell. Once I get this all poured, I have an assortment of shells and glass and pebbles and rocks, all from the Dollar Tree. They have some great craft supplies if you keep your eyes open, especially in the bigger stores. And I have 3 stores in about an 11-mile radius, so you can see where this one's turning a little bit green. It's fine. I'm not going to worry about it. It will go back towards brown when I'm done. So this is my dark brown. This is my cup of sand. It's okay if it's chunky and has some pebbles in it and some shell bits because it's all getting added to anyways. So I'm going to mix that in. Now I'm not going to really use this as a dam, but I am going to try and create a bit of a line where I want the beach part and the water part. They will mix a little bit here and there, but you'll see me working back and forth between the bottom and the top to try and keep some kind of a separation. I did level this a little bit, and then I moved it, so I'm kind of off level again. My table's not level, and this is also sitting on a piece of wood. It doesn't have to be perfect, but semi-level, so you don't end up with nothing here and overflowing the edge on that side. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to be using both a torch and my heat gun. I may smoke my project in a couple parts with the torch. It's okay. It just depends on how the white wants to cooperate when I get to that point. And I know it looks green. I promise it's not going to look that green when it's done. So I'm just going to spread this layer with the sand. And I'll get that bit that I dropped up there in a minute. Not terribly concerned with covering the glue on the bottom part with anything dark because it's going to get embellished at the very last step. So it's not the end of the world. I'm going to just use this glove because I'm going to ditch this pair of gloves anyways. There. So I'm going to start with a darker color towards the top. I'm going to run it pretty tight to that bead of glue. But I don't really want to get too much on the wood frame itself because I don't want to have to clean up a ton of the frame. And it's okay, like I said, I have more epoxy I can add to this color, or a color. This is another darker one. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that in here and dip it underneath. There is absolutely no right or wrong to this project. Whatever makes you happy. It doesn't even have to be beach scene. If you had little trinkets that were unicorns and rainbows, you could pour a rainbow of alcohol inks and embellish it however you wanted. You don't have to embellish it at all. So I am just layering in these blues. They are going to mix together some, which is perfectly fine because I'm going to hit them with heat and mix them all somewhat anyways. This is just the first layer. When I am down to the bottom of my cups, I'm going to go ahead and mix some more. Okay. Now I'm going to pour in my other sand color over top. I'm not going to go too far up because it is going to roll off some on its own. And I do want to try and keep somewhat of a line of definition. Okay. So I am going to pour the rest of this one in. And I'm going to mix some of these colors back up because I do need quite a bit more epoxy than that in this frame. I think I need a little bit more sand. Not sand, but the regular brown. I'm not going to mix any more of the sand in. And again, this is where I'm going to start getting different blues because I don't really label or keep track of which color went in which cup. I just kind of play it by ear, try and guess as close as I can. It's not an exact science, it's art. And art is subjective. I do already have a little cup set aside for the white. It's okay if this is sitting here getting a little bit thicker while I'm doing everything else, because the white is sort of going on top of and getting blown and heated into the other colors. I normally would have mixed more of each color to begin with anyways, but I'm out of the smaller size Dixie cup that I would use for something like that. So the only thing I have for portion control is these tiny cups, which is fine. They'll get the job done. It's just not the ideal. Okay. So here we go again with the messy hands. I'm going to mix the sand. Just going to go ahead and mix a little bit of the teak wood in this time because it really doesn't matter. I believe this was the indigo. And some of these I may mix two colors this time. I do think this was stream based on the color of the stick. I think this one was this blue. That was probably too much. It comes out of that one really, really fast. And this one will be the Baja blue now. This one will be the turquoise. And then this one can be the aqua. And the aqua, I might give 1 drop of indigo this time. 2 drops, whatever. So mix, mix, mix quick. See, by mixing colors, you can get a completely different look. I am going to real quick torch this before I mix the rest of these in, or add the rest of these. With whichever torch likes to light. Try this one. When torching a piece, it's important to keep it moving quick. If you get a couple bubbles in these, it's okay. It's water, but the most you can get out, the better. I am going to do a little more concentrated heat with the torch in a couple minutes on the white. I will try to be careful, but sometimes it does get a little hot and it might smoke just a tiny bit. I haven't caught one on fire yet though, so it's all good. And I haven't scorched my white to the point where it looks yucky. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go with the darks again. See if maybe it holds some more of the dark color this time. Do you want to get some up there and get that bit of hot glue covered? And then this one. The alcohol inks are all translucent, as opposed to like a resin dye or a mica. So those are really what you want to be using for a project of this nature. Otherwise, they won't be see-through. The only thing that is going to be opaque is the white. And obviously the brown layer that got the sand in it is slightly opaque, but still does allow some light through. So put a little bit of this up there. Okay, I'm going to scrape all of these out. Actually, I'm going to dump the rest of the sand in the bottom here. So 280 milliliters for a 10-inch. It's not filling these to the top. That's not my goal. You could, if you wanted to, on a silicone mat, build up a silicone wall, you know, with like tub silicone, and pour directly onto that and have no frame. I like the look of the frame. I think it gives it a little rustic beach house vibe. So that's what I am doing. Okay, that is all of that. All right, I'm going to hit this with the torch again real quick. Pop, pop, pop the bubbles. Warm it up a little bit. I am not going to hit this with the heat gun yet. I'm just going to let it sit as is. So far, nothing's running out. As it gets hotter, you might see some running. I realize I have a terrible glare from this ring. Sorry about that. So, I'm going to use a little bit of Pinata White ink. My little squirter nozzle is clogged on this, I know. Whoops. Doesn't really matter how much, but I think I'll go ahead and give it a little drop of the opaque dye and then my paint. You can't just use the white ink because you need it to have, I don't know the technical term I'm looking for, a different viscosity or density. Because it has to flow at a separate level. Okay. That is probably more than enough of that. That bottle's about empty and also clogged, so I had to take the top off. So I'm just going to mix that all up. Okay. And then I'm going to drizzle it on in a couple of lines where I want my wave look to be. On a flat piece that's dripping over the edges, I would just on and off. This, I'm going to try and alternate which side I start on because the starting side's going to pool a little bit more. So you want a decent line, not too much, not too little. For a piece this size, I typically start with about 5. I try and get one right on the beach line. That one I might do a little bit thicker, and then I try and get one like it's crashing over the beach. Now, this is one of those where I say you can add more, you can't take away. You can also come back in the next day and do another layer or repeated layers to give it more dimension, more effect, what have you. So I'm going to hit this with the heat gun first and see if I can't get it to move. Depending on what this particular mix does, I will torch the white to try and get some of the lacing to pop out. I'm going to switch over to just one vinyl glove for now, because all of my tools are sticky enough. So just a kind of direct, concentrated heat is fine. You can push it at an angle if you want your waves to roll at a specific angle. I find that harder to do in the frames than on a flat piece. So and I am getting some cells and lacing with just the heat gun. Trying to keep my tools out of the epoxy, but it doesn't always happen. Okay. I'm going to hit it with some heat too. Again, I know it's going to smoke a little bit, but it's fine. As long as it doesn't actually catch on fire, we're good. So I'm going to go back in and push some of this with the heat gun again, just to try and knock down some of that. And I think I'm actually pretty happy with that. Go back into this line a little bit. I don't like the harsh lines. All right, I really like the way that looks right now. If you don't love it, you can come back in with one of your sticks and like break up any odd parts. But overall, I'm actually quite pleased with that. It'll hold some of the structure as it cures, and some of it will flatten out. This one you can see some of it held, some of it broke down. It continues to work and move as it cures. This is an 8-inch one I did. This was actually the first one I did. Front side, back side. The back side with the white almost looks like blooms. But, all right, that is that. I know this video is getting pretty long. I am sorry for that. This is a, start to finish. So, again, I have been buying all of these little shells and things at the Dollar Trees as I come across them. Some come